Everyone thought they knew how the day would go. Marching boots, crisp salutes, and stoic guards. But what happened next left an entire crowd breathless. Before we dive into today's inspiring story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and follow our channel so you never miss the next incredible story of humanity and honor. The summer sun bathed Buckingham Palace in a brilliant glow, making the historic white stone walls shimmer against a cloudless blue sky. It was the kind of day tourists dreamed of. Perfect weather for witnessing the changing of the guard. Crowds lined the mall, craning their necks for the best view, their cameras and phones poised in anticipation. Amidst the buzz of eager spectators sat 9-year-old Liam, his wheelchair carefully positioned near the front barriers. For Liam, this wasn't just another tourist attraction. It was the fulfillment of a long-held dream. To see the Queen's Guard up close, to hear the rhythmic stomp of boots on gravel, and to feel the pride that came with witnessing centuries of tradition. His mother stood protectively behind him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, both hopeful and anxious. Despite the sea of strangers pressing in, Liam's focus never wavered. His wide eyes locked on the distant figure in a bright red tunic and tall bearskin hat, a symbol of dignity and strength. Today was supposed to be special, a memory to treasure. And little did Liam know, it would soon become an unforgettable moment, not just for him, but for everyone who witnessed it. As the minutes ticked by, the excitement around Buckingham Palace turned increasingly chaotic. Tourists jostled for better views, their bodies pressing in from every direction. For little Liam, seated quietly in his wheelchair, the wall of legs and shifting bodies became an overwhelming barrier. His mother politely asked for space, gently explaining that her son couldn't stand or move easily. But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The situation worsened when a man with a large camera bag forced his way to the front. His booming voice barked demands, caring little for anyone in his path. Without a second thought, he kicked the wheel of Liam's chair, trying to shove the boy aside. Shock rippled through nearby spectators, but few dared to intervene. Liam clutched his Union Jack flag tighter, blinking back tears as his dream of seeing a royal guard up close seemed to crumble. Through the sea of legs, Liam could just barely glimpse the distant figure of the immobile soldier, in red and black. He whispered, "He's so brave," unaware that soon, bravery would not just be something he admired from afar. It would reach out to protect him in a way no one could have predicted. The tension in the crowd became almost unbearable. The rude cameraman continued his disruptive behavior, mocking the royal guard with exaggerated poses and sneering comments. He leaned dangerously close to the soldier's face, making silly gestures and snapping pictures, testing the limits of the guard's legendary discipline. Onlookers shifted uncomfortably, murmuring disapproval, but most remained rooted to their spots, unsure whether to intervene. Meanwhile, young Liam, still clutching his little Union Jack flag, shrank lower in his wheelchair. His mother tightened her grip on the handles, her voice shaky but polite, as she once again asked the man to move aside. Instead, he scoffed loudly, brushing off her request and turning his attention back to the guard. "They don't even blink," he jeered. The crowd's unease grew heavier, like a gathering storm. People exchanged worried glances, their eyes flickering between the unflinching guard and the increasingly aggressive man. Then, in an unforgivable act of cruelty, the cameraman kicked the wheel of Liam's chair again, harder this time, jarring the boy backward. A gasp swept through the gathering. Liam's mother moved to shield her son, but the damage was done. Tears welled in Liam's eyes, his earlier excitement now reduced to fear and disappointment. The royal guard, a symbol of centuries of unwavering duty, remained motionless. But a subtle shift could be felt, an almost imperceptible awareness. It was as if the soldier, trained to withstand anything, recognized that something deeper than tradition was at stake. The entire courtyard seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if this embodiment of stoic honor would continue to stand still, or if, for once, the rules might bend in the face of simple human decency. Then, in a moment no one could have foreseen, something extraordinary happened. The royal guard, bound by centuries of tradition to remain stoic and still, shifted ever so slightly. His head turned, just enough to glance toward Liam and the commotion that had engulfed him. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some gasped aloud. A royal guard moving at his post was nearly unheard of, and now all eyes locked onto the scene unfolding. Without hesitation, the guard broke formation. He stepped away from his assigned path, his polished boots crunching softly against the gravel. Gasps and camera flashes filled the air as he strode purposefully toward the small boy in the wheelchair. In one swift, decisive movement, the guard placed himself between Liam and the aggressive cameraman, standing tall and unyielding. The troublemaker faltered, taken aback by the sudden, towering presence before him. But the guard did not stop there. With solemn grace, he knelt down beside Liam, lowering himself to meet the boy at eye level. His left hand, clad in a pristine white glove, rested gently on the armrest of Liam's wheelchair, a silent reassurance. Then, in a voice firm yet kind, he asked, "Are you all right, young man?" The courtyard, moments ago so noisy and chaotic, fell into a profound, reverent hush. Tears welled in the eyes of many onlookers. In that instant, a centuries-old symbol of discipline and duty had transformed into a living testament to compassion. It was a moment that none present would ever forget, a quiet act of humanity that transcended ceremony, touching every heart in sight. In that timeless courtyard, a royal guard, trained to embody silence and discipline, chose compassion over protocol. As he knelt beside young Liam, the bond between soldier and child became immediately apparent. His rifle, still held firmly in one hand, symbolized duty, but the gentle touch of his other hand on Liam's wheelchair spoke to something deeper. The human heart behind the uniform. The crowd remained utterly still, many fighting back tears. For a moment it felt as though centuries of strict tradition had simply melted away. This wasn't just a break in formation, it was a break in time itself. A singular act of kindness, cutting through the solemnity of royal pageantry. The guard's voice, calm and reassuring, asked again if Liam was all right. Liam, wide-eyed and trembling with emotion, managed a small nod. His mother, overwhelmed by the gesture, placed her hand over her heart in silent gratitude. Around them, the atmosphere softened. Strangers who had once jostled for the best view now stood shoulder to shoulder, united in awe and respect. Even the aggressive cameraman, who had caused so much pain, seemed to shrink under the weight of what he had witnessed. With great care, the guard helped maneuver Liam's wheelchair closer to the barricade, ensuring the boy could see the ceremony he had longed for. In doing so, he reminded everyone present that sometimes the greatest service is not found in rigid adherence to rules, but in the courage to recognize when compassion must take precedence. It was a lesson none who witnessed it would ever forget. As the first guard knelt beside young Liam, a second guard approached, his polished boots moving silently across the courtyard gravel. Those watching feared that this second soldier, bound by centuries of tradition, might reprimand his comrade for breaking protocol. But instead of stern words or orders to resume formation, something remarkable happened. The second guard paused, surveying the scene with quiet understanding. In a subtle, yet unmistakable gesture, he gave a small, respectful nod, a silent endorsement of his fellow guardsman's act of compassion. Without a word spoken, the message was clear. Sometimes the heart must lead where rules would otherwise dictate. Together, the two soldiers carefully adjusted Liam's position, ensuring that the boy had a clear view of the ceremonial proceedings. Their movements were deliberate, yet tender, marked by an honor that transcended their rigid training. The crowd, moved beyond words, watched in reverent silence. Some wiped away tears, others simply stood in quiet awe at the scene unfolding before them. It was a reminder that true strength lies not in the rigid following of tradition, but in the courage to show humanity when it is needed most. As the changing of the guard ceremony continued in the background, Liam sat taller in his wheelchair, a small Union Jack flag fluttering proudly in his hand. For that young boy, and for everyone privileged to witness the moment, it was clear that this day would be remembered not for its flawless pageantry, but for an extraordinary act of kindness that broke barriers and touched hearts across the world. As the ceremony regained its solemn rhythm, attention shifted back to the disruptive cameraman who had caused so much pain and distress. Palace officials, who had quietly monitored the escalating situation, moved swiftly yet discreetly. Two security personnel approached the man, who now seemed far less confident than he had been moments earlier. With little fanfare, he was escorted out of the area, his earlier bravado replaced by a visible sense of embarrassment. The crowd, who had once been passive observers, watched in quiet approval as the troublemaker was removed. There was no cheering, no jeering, only a deep, shared understanding that respect for others, especially the vulnerable, was not negotiable within these historic grounds. Meanwhile, Liam remained at the front, his Union Jack flag now waving proudly. His mother, wiping tears of relief, offered a grateful smile to the guards who had protected her son. Though the rudeness and cruelty had briefly marred the afternoon, it was the guards' humanity and the crowd's ultimate support that defined the day. It became clear to all who witnessed it, tradition must be upheld, but never at the cost of compassion and decency. As the ceremony concluded, Liam sat tall in his wheelchair, his little Union Jack flag fluttering with pride. His smile, wide and genuine, reflected the unforgettable kindness he had received that day. Across the courtyard, strangers who had witnessed the moment clapped softly, not for the ceremony, but for the humanity that had transcended tradition. That evening, videos and photographs of the guards' compassionate act flooded the internet, touching hearts across the world. News outlets praised the soldiers' decision to place empathy above rigid protocol, reminding everyone that the finest traditions endure because they allow room for humanity. At home, Liam watched the footage over and over with his mother, a sense of wonder lighting up his face. For him, it wasn't just about seeing a royal guard. It was about feeling seen and valued in a way he had never expected. Buckingham Palace later released a rare statement acknowledging the event, affirming that while traditions must be upheld, moments of compassion honor the crown as deeply as ceremony. And so, a boy's dream, a soldier's heart, and a crowd's silent hope came together to create a story that would be remembered long after the banners were folded and the last boots left the gravel. In a world that often demands strict adherence to rules and traditions, the story of the Royal Guard and young Liam reminds us of a timeless truth. Compassion must never be forgotten. While duty and honor are the pillars of service, it is kindness that leaves the most lasting impression. This moment at Buckingham Palace teaches us that even the most disciplined among us can, and should, find the courage to act when humanity calls. A simple touch on a young boy's wheelchair, a few words of comfort, and a willingness to step outside the expected changed not just one afternoon, but countless lives around the world. In our own lives, we are often presented with moments where we can choose between following routine and reaching out with empathy. The greatest acts of courage are not always grand gestures. Sometimes they are the quiet choices to protect, to comfort, and to stand beside those who need it most. No matter our age or station in life, we all have the power to turn a moment of indifference into a legacy of kindness, of